I'm coming out of my hut. There could be danger all around. What's going on? Oh my goodness. Look at the landscape. Look at the natural beauty. It's so majestic. Every time something happens, this comes on. It's like a Disney ride.
Right, which made it awesome.
Yeah.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my co-hosts, Ash, Please Don't Hurt My Mules, Timmons.
Hi, y'all.
And Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And each week we take a look back in time, decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatpod.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV. We review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, Lovecraft Country, and Watchmen. Find all information and past episodes at shatpod.com/TV. And finally, to hang out with us live, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatpod.com/Twitch, where we play video games, host watch parties, and edit this podcast live. All that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing tonight?
Gene, for tonight's recording and tonight's film, it's a very, very special day. It's a formal day. I felt like I should have worn a tux and a tie. This isn't so much a movie as this is a film. This is a moment in time. No obscure like Japanese animated film here. No, just small time picture with a tiny budget. This is what Shat the Movies was made for. This is a multi-Oscar winner, top 250 IMDb film. And that's why I was excited when one of our great listeners, Josh, wrote in and asked us to commission the 1990 epic Western, Dances with Wolves.
When Josh wrote in and said, hey guys, I'm not sure what to say, so I'll just start typing and see what happens. I started listening around 2018-19, and when I look back on the last 4 years, it's hard not to get emotional. We had a major lawsuit, a bankruptcy, a pandemic, a suicide in the family, and finally some redemption. I've had 4 kids in there, one since I requested this commission, and your pod was a cornerstone for me. Listening to you guys banter at the movies I grew up on gave me comfort. I could always throw the buds in, take a walk, and feel normal again for an hour or 5 if I needed it. Couldn't do it without you. I honestly don't know what drives you to keep putting the effort in after all this time, but it's appreciated. On to the movie. The first time I saw Dances with Wolves must have been 91. My mother had gotten remarried, and my brother and I went to stay with an aunt, and I can still see the framed movie poster hanging over her Chesterfield that was not for sitting in the sitting room that was never to have people inside. She owned 3 movies, this one being my favorite as it was in color. My brother and I watched it on repeat, and it's been with me ever since. Now, I don't know how this will hold up. I'm sure Gene will have some white savior rant prepared. I'm willing to look past that and the historical inaccuracies. Seeing it through John Dunbar's eyes was a way to connect to a culture I knew nothing about. And I don't know I would have started that journey without this film. Trying to be objective, I'll say 1.5 wipes. In my heart, it's a quarter of a wipe all day. Thanks again for all you do. Boobs. Haha. I just made Ash say boobs. Forever a friend, Josh.
Josh, you were so close. I'm not going to talk about White Savior. I am going to talk about Noble Savage on this podcast. But let's rewind a second here. You had 4 kids in 4. Like, how did you have time to listen to a podcast? Or were you listening to it while you were boning? That's insane. You're so fertile or so virile.
He might live in a teepee, and just everyone's there. You just get busy.
Yeah.
If somebody's watching you, the kids are there. It's okay. It's a big communal living experience. And Josh is doing it right. Good for you, Josh.
And I just want to know, were they all intentional? Because, I had 2 in 2.5 years, and, one was a big whoops, right? And that's how 2 happened in 2.5 years. I can't imagine 4 in 4 years. That sounds exhausting.
Wait, I might be reading too much into this, but actually, there was the major lawsuit. Then you have 1 kid. And then the bankruptcy.
Another.
And the other one.
That's
the pandemic, the third one. And then the suicide?
Crisis
and then the fourth kid was the redemption.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't resist Josh. I imagine there's some magnetism to his personality's appearance.
Hey, I think this proves my theory that when bad shit happens, we want to have sex. Like I said on Muriel's wedding, like I said on all these episodes, and you call bullshit, Big D. Bad shit makes you want to fuck.
Not only do you want to fuck, but all your sperm wakes up, the eggs get ready. Like, tears. It's
like
just tears.
the world. It's like the world is shit, so you throw your genetic material out into the void. Evolution.
Big D, this is our big like TikTok health influencer thing. We sell tears as a lubricant to help with fertility.
Exactly. That'll work.
We're off to a great start. Dances with Wolves is a 1990 epic Western starring and produced by Kevin Costner in his feature directorial debut. It is a film adaptation of the 1988 novel Dances with Wolves that tells the story of Union Army Lieutenant John J. Dunbar, played by Costner, who travels to the American frontier and meets a group of Lakota. The film earned favorable reviews from critics and audiences and was a box office hit, grossing $424 million worldwide, making it the highest grossing film for Orion Pictures. The film was nominated for 12 Academy Awards and won 7, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Film Editing, Best Cinematography, Best Original Score, and Best Sound Mixing. The film also won the Golden Globe Award for Best Motion Picture in a Drama. It is one of only 3 Westerns to win the Oscar for Best Picture. So if you were alive in 1990, you saw this movie on VHS. There was no way to escape it. It was up there with Batman, with Jurassic Park. This was peak cinema when I was 10 years old. And amazingly, it made just as much sense to me then as it does now, which is a testament to how universally understandable this film is. Josh kind of nailed it on the head when this is kind of like a gateway movie, right? It doesn't have to be perfectly accurate, but for a lot of us, including me, this was like my first foray into American Indian culture.
I agree. This was a huge film. This was epic. This was Oscar bait. The films that they release them at the end of the year, so they fit within that eligibility window for like the major awards. It came out in November. And I remember that my manager at Blockbuster, Karen, she would always get screener copies for the Academy Award films. I don't know how she did it, but I've mentioned it before that around this time we'd get excited because she'd pull it in. She'd let the few of us make copies. I took it home, watched it with my family because just like Tom Hanks, I think Kevin Costner is something that mom could get behind, dad could get behind. Nobody's really got an issue with him. So this was a big one. The only thing I hated it because at Blockbuster, this was a 2-tape rental. This and JFK, the damn rubber bands would break. People would return tape 1, forget tape 2. It just was a logistical nightmare for me. But that's where I first saw it.
Can you imagine being a guy who acts, saves up money, gets his picture greenlit, produces it, directs it, stars in it, and there's some punk out there, some teenager working at Blockbuster's like, 2 tapes? I hate this.
Well, I just wanted more people to have the opportunity to see the film.
Oh, that's what it was?
Yeah, it limits.
Selfless.
I'm a people person. I like to please.
Well, I love a Western. I adore Kevin Costner. And I remember this being like a really epic film from the 90s for me. My mom was like obsessed with it. But this is going to sound really weird. And I think it's because I probably didn't see this until maybe 2 years after it came out on VHS. So that puts it at 92, which happens to be the same year as Last of the Mohicans. And for some reason, this movie and my experience with it runs together with Last of the Mohicans for me. And I know they're completely different movies, but they go together in my head. And what's weird is I watch both of them probably the same amount of times growing up. But for some reason, I remember Mohicans like so much better than I did this one, even though this one is incredibly long. So I was excited to go back and watch it because I remembered liking it, but couldn't really remember what it was about.
I feel like Mohicans was a bit more intense.
Oh, definitely.
And it probably tapped into those like romantic receptors in your brain.
Yeah.
Just kind of had a more staying power there.
Yeah, my 9-year-old self at 1992 was really moved by Daniel Day-Lewis. No, I mean, like, I don't know. There's just something about, they're both about Indians, right? Like, and so maybe just as a kid, it was like, I grouped them.
Yeah, I mean, as the guy who mistakes every movie for every other movie, I have no room to talk. And I probably would have made the same connection if I'd watched them both in the 90s.
I mean, this one doesn't have any people getting burned alive. No. It doesn't have any virgin suicides. This one was, I don't want to say it's a feel-good film, but it was more like you said. Though. It was like hey, let's go. Yeah, it's a historic film that'll be fun. No burning people.
Yeah, ritual self-mutilation and mourning and the slaughter of animals. Good times.
And like the genocide of a people.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that one.
Let's put that
difference
one
is
in there.
that was what Last Mohicans was. They were the last of their kind, but it was just
Yeah,
it wasn't as violent.
we're gonna get to that at the end of what I think the differences of these two movies.
Let's hit the trailer.
Just hear that you've been decorated, and they sent you here to be posted.
Actually, sir, I'm here at my own request.
Why?
I've always wanted to see the frontier.
You want to see the frontier?
Yes, sir. Before it's gone.
There ain't nothing here, Lieutenant. Everybody's run off or got killed.
What about Indians? Buffalo.
They're gonna hang you.
In 1863, First Lieutenant John J. Dunbar suffers a leg wound and chooses death in battle over amputation. He rides along the Confederate lines, and the Union Army uses the distraction to mount a successful attack. Dunbar receives a citation for bravery, medical care, and Cisco, the horse that carried him in battle. Dunbar requests a transfer to the Western frontier so he can see it before it disappears. So before we dig into the accuracy of this movie or its cultural impact or its insane predictability, I want to take a moment to appreciate how visually impressive it is. Dances with Wolves makes me feel like every other 90s movie I watched was printed on silly putty. Like everything was just kind of blurry, out of focus, no attention to detail. This movie, the markings on the horses, the little US on the Union horses, the fit of the officers' uniforms, the construction of the tents, the weapons, everything looked great. And I thought, okay, this has got to have like some insane budget like Titanic or something. No, it didn't cost that much to make. Titanic was $200 million. Nowhere near that. Krull was $50 million. Dances with Wolves, $22 million, which is actually below average cost for a 1990 movie.
Yeah, I actually had to go back and reread that number. And then I went, and I rarely do this, but I went and fact checked your number because I did not believe that this could be correct, because I thought it had to be like 10 times that when I first started doing my notes for this pod, because I don't know how they did it on that low of a budget, because this movie is gorgeous. It feels expansive. It feels epic. And I cannot imagine how beautiful this film must have been in a movie theater, because I never saw it in a movie theater. I saw it at home. I apologize, Big D, to you and the other Blockbuster workers for the amount of times we had the two tapes here. And I can't imagine, because watching it on our bulbous 1992, pokey outy TV, it was beautiful. I can't imagine what it was like to see it on the big screen.
But Gene, $22 million. I would have said, let's do $23 million and get a decent mustache. You have like multiple skinned buffalo. This only sets you have a couple teepees, open field, that tiny mud hut, and then the first fort and maybe the Confederate fight. That's about it. That mustache and facial hair, you could see the gum, the glue where they put it to his face. It looks awful.
He had to have been shooting something else at the same time, because later in the movie, when he decides to shave, I think that was Kevin Costner as the director being like, I'm tired of wearing this fake mustache. Yeah. And so he just decides, oh, hey, stands with fist, I shaved. And now I look like I'm in Waterworld.
Yeah, that was a good shave. It was perfect. He was looking good.
Well, this movie is very famous in the fact that it is credited with reinvigorating the entire genre of Westerns. Famously, Roger Ebert's review of this talks about, in a time when Westerns are supposed to be dead, we get Dances with Wolves, right? And this film went on to make $424 million worldwide, as you already said, on that very tiny $22 million budget. And we all know what Hollywood does. They look at it and they go, okay, you make that much money, we're going to remake this movie in every way possible to try to capitalize. It's the exact thing of why it is such a horrifying reality that the Mario Brothers movie is making so much money right now, because very soon we will have 10,000 video game adaptations like Crash Bandicoot the film and Overwatch the film. Those are all coming our way because that fucking film has made so much money. This, though, I think did a good thing for Hollywood, and that they felt like they could make Westerns again. And now, granted, some of the Westerns that came out after this were garbage, for sure. But think about it. Tombstone, we get in 93. We get Unforgiven in 92. And those are two incredible movies. And then we even get great comedies like City Slickers and Maverick. Those films would not have happened without the success of this one. And I think what it did is it showed that everything that a Western could be. What other genre can you have this sweeping, this dramatic, this beautiful, this epic? I don't know that another genre exists that allows us to have all of those things at once. And this movie in particular, Dances with Wolves, it has everything that makes a Western so great. And therefore it made these other films really great, like by proxy.
And speaking of that reinvigoration, we're not saying that Westerns weren't around. So obviously Kevin Costner was in Silverado in 1985, which we covered. This was a change to the way the genre is done, as I think what Ash is getting at, in that think about the movies that came out after this. They were very, very different from the Silverados of the world, right? Like you mentioned, Tombstone, Unforgiven. This is the break point where the 90s style of Western came in. And yeah, there was that explosion. And it's really too bad that the Civil War movie craze of the late 80s isn't around today, because I feel like we need it now, like more than ever. And yeah, we had News of the World recently with Tom Hanks. There was Free State of Jones, but those are kind of smaller movies. They're nowhere as big as Dances with Wolves or like Glory. And it was so weird to watch this movie in a post-MAGA world when people are just like casually throwing away terms like seceding from the United States or we're bound for a civil war. And then you actually see it and it's nuts, right? It's like, it's in the middle of America and there's just Americans fighting Americans. It's like, fuck, this is just a small reminder. And it's only for 5 minutes of the movie, but a really graphic reminder of, what we're actually talking about.
But I think for everything the film does to make it epic, you're saying this made it okay to make a big film with sprawling landscape and distances. It's something that you like a go-to movie. But the thing that they do that is just so 90s, and it annoyed me, especially watching this, is the sweeping score. It is over the top, overly inspirational. And it just I felt like it was Far and Away or Legend of the Fall or Braveheart or Last of the Mohegans.
Those are all great scores.
I was about to say, those are all amazing.
No, they're good. They're good. But I think the other films do it so it's not over the dialogue. It is a background to the film. The scenery is breathtaking enough. We don't need an accompanying orchestral piece to make us think, wow, look at the splendor of the landscape. Wow, this moment is exciting, or this discovery. They're beating you over the head with the music to set the mood instead of just letting us experience it. Later in the film, there's some quiet moments where you just hear the hooves. You hear indistinct, conversations of people. And to me, it felt so much better. It's like writing a script. They always say, don't tell us, show us. This film, this was like a Disney ride.
So of course it's very grand. I mean, the film is grand, the music is grand. So you're saying it was distracting?
It was distracting, and then every scene was like this, okay? I'm coming out of my hut. There could be danger all around. What's going on? Oh my goodness. Look at the landscape. Look at the natural beauty. It's so majestic. Every time something happens, this comes up. It's like a Disney ride.
Right, which made it awesome.
Yeah.
Like, I thought it was amazing. And I call BS on your Legends of the Fall reference here. Like, I don't think any score is more distracting than Legends of the Fall, where we start with the dead brother singing, and then the rest of the movie is just the big sweeping versions of that song.
Yeah, we're not talking about Nuns on the Run. That's a distracting soundtrack.
Well, just so you know, I played you the theme from Soarin' the Ride. That's what I just played.
Yeah, I felt something.
I felt like I was soaring through the West, as I was supposed to.
Dunbar is transferred to Fort Hays, commanded by Major Fambro, who despises Dunbar's enthusiasm and kills himself after assigning Dunbar to the remote Fort Sedgwick. Dunbar and mule wagon provisioner Timmons find Fort Sedgwick deserted, so Dunbar decides to stay and operate the post himself. Timmons is killed by Pawnee on the journey back to Fort Hays, leaving the army unaware of Dunbar's assignment, and no other soldiers arrive to reinforce the post.
So I understand that they want the character of Dunbar. He's got to be relatable. He's got to be the everyman. So when we are introduced to him on the battlefield, he's already been injured. He's not an especially talented soldier. He doesn't go out there and save the day through some crazy, like, brilliant strategy or some unusual act of valor. He isn't loved because he tried to do something exceptional. No, he just lucks into it. He goes out there to kill himself and somehow is protected by this giant plot armor. And I could just see Forrest Gump. I'm like, this is a smarter Forrest Gump. He's out there running through the jungle. He's got to save Bubba. And he survives through sheer luck. He comically stumbles around the frontier, making mistake after mistake after mistake. He should have been killed. He survives by luck and incompetence. And he doesn't have a single flaw. The man is perfect. He's an author. He's an artist. He's a linguist. The kids love him. They make dolls about him. He is so perfect. It was just tiring.
Okay, like, I don't know. You guys know I have no love lost at all for Forrest Gump. I think it's an absolutely terrible movie. I think it's trash. But I think Dunbar's a great character. I think he makes this incredibly hard choice, which kicks off our relationship with him. And I think Costner plays him really well. I like that he's relatable. And come on, like, isn't survival of any war, especially wars like this, in some way dumb luck? Because I'm rewatching Band of Brothers right now. And that show proves that it is all fucking luck about how those people live. There's that episode where, hello, the hot priest from Fleabag, I did not realize was in Band of Brothers. And it's the episode where they're in, like, the trenches, and then he randomly gets hit by a stray bullet and the guy next to him didn't. It's not that the guy next to him was good at his job. It's not like he was a better soldier or hot priest was like a bad soldier. It was just fucking dumb luck. Now, wars today, much more based on skill. But this, I mean, like, they all stood in a line and shot at one another.
Gene, do you remember ghost riding your bicycle? Where you would, like, just drive your bike and you'd throw your hands up and you would just jump off the bike and we keep going. That's what he's doing. He's trying to be a bullet catcher. They're like, hey, come back again. Give us another round. He's like, okay, let's do it.
I mean, we established during the Rat episode that I can't do shit on a bike. I if I tried to do that, I would fall off, which makes my decision to ride motorcycles for life really questionable. But I think there's a difference between Dunbar and Forrest Gump in the journal, because through that journal, we get the deeper thoughts, and he's a very clever guy, has a clever understanding of the world, and he makes some really smart decisions that I would argue show his skill. For instance, when he is out at Fort Sedgwick and wind in his hair comes up and he's fucking with Dunbar. Dunbar's got his gun out, but he doesn't shoot. And I'm like, I would have shot that guy. The guy's coming at me. He's got a weapon, but he knows you pull that trigger, you're as good as dead. You can't go anywhere. They're going to come after you. You're dead. He understands that he can't have a polluted water supply. He understands as soon as he lights that fire that there's smoke in the air, he's like, oh, I just fucked myself. So yes, there are elements of luck. Absolutely. There is a thread that is Forrest Gump-esque, just as there is a thread that is Heart of Darkness-esque, but he is his own character, maybe somewhat derivative, but I think he's unique. I haven't seen a Dunbar prior, and I haven't really seen this redone in any film.
I'm glad you mentioned the journal. So this is another part in the film that I'm not sure how I feel, and I'm conflicted, is the exposition. He's keeping a journal the entire time, and he's talking to us. Don't tell us, show us. We're seeing the things. Sometimes some of the lines were just cringeworthy. When Socks is coming up there, he's talking to him. If you come back again tomorrow, your name will be Socks. Yeah, we get it. Just call him Socks one day. Or, oh, the wagon wheels let me know that these were white hunters. Yeah, dude, we know. Trust us. We know.
He's not writing in the journal for you. He's writing in a journal for him. It's a better.
But don't read.
Listen, I journal. And sometimes when I write in my journal, it's very basic shit. I'm not trying to compose an essay. I'm not writing a poem. It's literally what happened that day. But those are some of my favorite parts of the movie. It reminded me so much of Thoreau or Emerson, right? When you're like reading like Self-Reliance or Walden. It's just these very simple statements of fact. And I loved when he was talking about, the wolf, and he says, if he comes calling tomorrow, I will name him Two Socks. Because that's how I think. If I were to see a bird that showed up at my house every day, eventually I wouldn't be like, craziest thing happened, journal. Saw a bird today. He was so wacky. I'm going to call him Wacky Bird. No, I would say, saw a bird today. If he comes back tomorrow, I'm going to name him Carl.
Right. It's like it's captain's log, Like it's the way he keeps himself occupied. I think it's nice. And I think you need it because he's in this very isolated environment. Otherwise it becomes like a silent film in some parts because like it's just him. And this movie's like long, but I think the scope needs it. You need time to take in this place, and you have to get like used to everyone. You've got to get used to narration. You've got to get used to what's going on in the story. And for me, this part was like really breathtaking, just that setting and just getting to see how expansive this part of the country was before it was really developed. And I could not help but think of Westworld here. Like a lot of the shots in Westworld, the show, I think were in direct reference to some of the shots that Costner does here. Westworld, I previously was like, this is the best capture of what the Wild West looked like, because not wild because of shooting, not wild because of guns and bars. And I really like that part of this movie.
I read a quote once about how American Indians don't see wild animals as wild because there's no such thing as a wilderness, right? Everything is natural. In fact, the constructs that we put up are the unnatural thing, right? And if you look at the world that way, you kind of see that we're all nature and you should feel much more safe. And I think this movie captured that really well, as you were saying, Ash. A typical movie that would come out about a guy living on the frontier. He's going out to get firewood and then a bear pops up and it's going to chase him, or like he's going to get water and then there's a flash flood and all the dangers of the world trying to kill this man. When in fact, that's probably not what it's like. It's probably lots of days of tedium. It's writing in your journal about a wolf you saw that day. And you're right. It takes 3 hours to show the movie that way, because if you shortened it, then you're like, so Kevin Costner went and looked outside for a while. And then Indians, like, that's it.
Yeah, so I'm going to be honest. I forgot that this movie opened up with him in a war. So I was a little thrown off when it started. Again, like it's like this weird thing from my childhood where I thought the cover of this movie was the cover of Glory with Matthew Broderick.
Give it like 10 years and you'll get this movie mixed up with Ravenous, and that's going to get really weird.
Right, and then it gets weird real fucking quick, right? But it took until this part of the film for me to reconnect with my memories about it, because I remembered it being slow. I remembered it being expansive. I remembered it being a Western where it opens up as a war movie and becomes a Western.
Well, Dunbar encounters his Sioux neighbors when they attempt to steal his horse. Multiple times. Seeking the Sioux camp to attempt dialogue, Dunbar comes across Stands with a Fist, ritually mutilating herself in mourning for her late Sioux husband. Captured from her white family, she was adopted as the daughter of the tribe's medicine man, Kicking Bird. Dunbar brings her back to the Sioux to recover. He gradually establishes a rapport with Kicking Bird, the warrior wind in his hair, and the youth smiles a lot. The language barrier frustrates them, and Stands with a Fist acts as an interpreter.
So we've talked a lot about the beauty of the film, and I remember the letterbox version. That was the one you had to find the VHS because they had full screen and letterbox. It is gorgeous with the exception of one shot. we're going to get the backstory of how, Stands with Fist, her origin. How did this white woman come to join the tribe? And it's tragic. It is your worst nightmare. Ash, you're out in the middle of the frontier. Your whole family is slaughtered in front of you. But why shoot it? Like Forrest Gump, we get a run in slow motion. She's running. It doesn't emphasize the violence. There's no tension. It felt gimmicky to me. It was just, and I understand that this was Costner's direction. He didn't know what to do with it, but they could have done this so much better. And I'm not a director, but I'm just going to spitball this out there. Think, if you had just focused on her experience, just show it from her perspective, the horror, have her running and just the sounds behind her of just people getting murdered. Here, I felt nothing.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a thing from that time period. I think that storytellers at this time didn't trust audiences to, kind of understand things the way that they do now. It's almost like they had to give cue cards of some sort on like when to laugh, when to be sad, when to know it's dramatic. And I think that this right here is a perfect example of that. And we were conditioned to it back then. But today, when we encounter things of this nature, like they feel completely out of place.
This is going to sound incredibly superficial. I just did not remember Stands with the Fist being so fucking old. Like, it's probably because in every movie like this, the leading man is in his mid-30s, and then he'll meet some tribal lady who is brown, and he'll woo her, and she's like impossibly hot and uncomfortably young. She's got to be like 20 years old. Especially, Kevin Costner being the director and the star of the movie, he could have gone with like some hot POA, but instead, Costner's like, fuck all that. I specifically want a white woman with lines on her face. And boy, did he get what he wanted. Because Mary McDonnell, she's terrific in this role. She's really, really good. She's got that crazy hair, the crazy behavior, rolling around the grass, thinking about the way her parents got slaughtered, animalistic, kissing. She's just, mwah, mwah. She's bringing something really interesting to the screen and a lot of lines in her face.
For sure, but I still think really, really, really attractive because there's this one shot where she's like standing in front of a teepee with a red shawl around her neck and like, hair blowing in the wind. And she looks like a movie star. Like she's not a baby, but she's still pretty beautiful.
I think she looks appropriately weathered. I noticed
With
all the
makeup.
time the chapped lips. I thought like the lips were chapped. The wrinkles, it didn't make her old as much more as it was a tough life. And I think the whole cast looked great, with the exception of Costner's pube beard. Everybody looked like they were living out in the frontier. To
clarify, I don't disagree with the casting. And I also am glad that they did not go with the younger actress. I think that she was perfect for the role. I did wonder, like, fucking how long has she been with this tribe, right? Like, it feels like maybe you would have, I don't know, moved on in some way. But they kind of are like Kicking Bird's still keeping her around like his idiot daughter. That part's a little weird. Well, Dunbar is accepted as an honored guest by the Sioux after he tells them of a migrating herd of buffalo and participates in the hunt. He befriends a wolf he dubs Two Socks for its white forepaws. Observing Dunbar and Two Socks chasing each other, the Sioux give Dunbar the name Dances with Wolves. He supplies the tribe with firearms, wins Kicking Bird's approval to marry Stands with a Fist, and abandons Fort Sedgwick. Because of the growing threat from the Pawnee and the U.S., Chief Ten Bears decides to move the tribe to its winter camp. Dunbar attempts to retrieve his diary from Fort Sedgwick, but finds the fort reoccupied by the U.S. Army. Because of his Sioux clothing, the soldiers open fire, killing his horse and capturing Dunbar.
So I read a bunch of critical reviews, both of like now and when this first came out. And what a lot of them basically say is that this is telling such a simple story. And I don't know if I bought that at first because it is a long experience to make your way through. But then I went back and re-experienced it. And I don't think that they're wrong in pointing out the simplicity. The story is simple. It's basically a bunch of people with nothing in common getting to know one another and then eventually feeling comfortable enough with one another to share a life together. And like, that's really it. That's where the narrative kind of stops. And so you've got an epic setting, you've got epic characters, you've got all of those types of things. But through all of that epicness, through all of that big scale, there's one simple tale that's really beautifully being woven through. And what I like the most is that it's being given all of this space, like just to happen. And there's something really unique about that. And there are things that I think we see in modern day that try to kind of have the same opinion because, we've already talked about, the Heart of Darkness and Joseph Conrad there. And so you've got, one of your greatest texts ever about colonialism. And so you have movies that try to recapture that. And the one that comes to mind most of all is like The Last Samurai, starring Tom Cruise. And so you've got a similar era here. You've got a similar plot structure to what we're dealing with in this situation, although set in a totally different country. And I understand that, but politics are all over that film and it's good, but it's not great. And the story here, I think, is great because it doesn't drown in that complexity. It just tells a really beautiful tale in a very classic way. And like Conrad, some people say it's boring, but I think this is not boring. I think it's simple and nice.
And Dances with Wolves does a lot of this like dichotomy of light and dark and responsibility and irresponsibility. Yeah. And there's this scene where they have the buffalo hunt, right? So the Sioux are very, very excited. Dances with Wolves, he spies the buffalo and they're going to go and track them down and do their hunt. They haven't seen buffalo in a very long time. The numbers are being depleted. And then you see that the buffalo are already massacred, right, by white men. And while this particular tribe of Lakota led by 10 Bears might have restrained itself during buffalo hunts, maybe taken only what they needed. It didn't look like it. It looked like they were wiping out some pretty heavy numbers of buffalo. Dances with Wolves as a film, it kind of presents an oversimplified view of how Indians and white people approached bison. And I'm going to get into this noble savage thing now. White people, without a doubt, I'm not trying to rewrite history here. They slaughtered bison at an unsustainable rate. They had rifles, which hadn't been seen on the plains before. They had, horses. They were very industrial and methodical about this, and they were killing them by the millions. But the Sioux, it's not like they were totally innocent. It's not that they were like heroic conservationists that were sitting on the top of the hill with a single tear dropping out of their eyes. They see like all the dead bison. They killed bison. They skinned bison, mostly cows. So that's really going to hurt your rates of reproduction more than anything. And they didn't just do it to eat. They traded for more weapons. They traded for whiskey. Listen, Sioux are normal people. And once they understood the tools and the economy, Indians got in on the bison trade like everyone else. So this is sort of an easy way out, almost an oversimplification of how all this went down.
Oh, totally. They're doing it for the right reasons because this is their land. They love the environment. No, they were just limited by technology. The second that he gives them the rifles, they're like, oh shit, yep, woof, let's go. I found myself wondering if, like, let's just say the Europeans never showed up, right? And the U.S. stayed a course, was never populated. People never went west. Do you think over time they would have eventually evolved into like modern day? Because once they started having tools, machines that help them, but let's just say it this way, would the culture have taken the same course?
First of all, yeah, I want to steer way clear of the word evolved, because to assume that all societies are on a single track that gets them toward what we determine to be evolution, right?
I just meant technologically. Would they have evolved technologically?
Well, I mean, if they were handed the technology, you mean?
No, would they have developed the rifles on their own and then started doing mass hunts? Would they
I don't think
the railroad?
I don't think they had the access to the industrial tools to make the rifles. It wouldn't fit the way of life. I think even if rifles were introduced to American Indians and they were left alone, and I'm by no means an expert on this, this is purely conjecture, I don't think things would be as they are today if they were just left alone, right? I think that there would be, and I understand that tribes went to war. I understand that territorialism was a thing. I understand that eventually some would subjugate others based on the technology they had. I get all of that. But what I'm saying is, no, I don't think America would look anything like it is today if we had just been like, here's some rifles, goodbye. And while I can critique this depiction of the buffalo hunt, I do want to show some deep respect for some of the values of the Sioux, of American Indians that are demonstrated in this film. I don't know if anyone remembers this, but in the 90s, even non-Disney movies attempted to have lessons. And I've talked shit about Stephen King for this. He does it in a bad way. Dances with Wolves does it in a good way. It is full of lessons. Mm-hmm. And I appreciated it. One that really caught my attention was how they deliberated with respect. It was incredible. When the Sioux were deciding what to do about Dunbar's arrival at Fort Sedgwick, they heard one another. They spoke to one another, and they even complimented the wisdom of one another's positions when they were disagreeing on a course of action. I can only imagine what this would be like on Facebook. Like if someone's like, I can't believe that you're running windmills to power cars. Those windmills are going to kill birds. And I would say, my brother, I respect your concern for the birds. They are very valuable creatures and deserving of life. And I understand that the windmill is an eyesore, but perhaps we should explore the damage that soot and carbon monoxide does to the life of birds. You know, that would be the way to do it, but we don't do that. We're like, fuck you, right? That's how it goes.
No, but this is the part in the film where now Dunbar, he's kind of integrated himself into the Sioux tribe. And there is just a light year jump in his ability to speak the language. We can timestamp the entire year because when he gets captured by the Union soldiers, they say, he says last April was when I took possession of the fort. So let's just say after 6 months, he is fluent. He can have full conversations. It's not just like, hey, that was a good swap, a good trade. He's able to get the nuance of the language down perfectly when discussing stands with a fist, dead husband, complex ceremonies, rituals. He's planning war strategy. This is a bit fast. 6 months, no way.
See, but it's not just the language, though, right? It's also the customs, because that's what I think is so crazy is he doesn't just become like fluent in how they talk. He becomes fluent in like all the things that they do.
Everything.
Like he becomes Indian in like 6 months. It's like the Duolingo for the Indian culture in like 6 months.
I know that some American Indian languages, particularly like Navajo, are very, very difficult to learn. Like that's why they used them for World War II codes. But I've also found American Indians' rate of speech to make it much easier to sort of understand. Because I think in most languages, the problem that I have isn't necessarily knowing the words. It's people talk way too fucking fast. Like I've been trying with Spanish a lot lately. And as soon as somebody knows that I know a little bit of Spanish, the language is like super rapid. Like Big D, I imagine when you're in Brazil, if you even utter a word of Portuguese, you're like inundated, right? It's just an avalanche of words. And you're like, whoa, like it's not knowing the words, it's the speed that they're coming at you.
Yeah.
Correct, because your brain kind of falls behind. I feel like I'm on a treadmill and somebody just jumps. So I'm trying to process words and it's like Lucy, boxing the chocolates. I'm far behind on the assembly line. Our audience, if they're over 40, they'll know what that reference was.
Yeah, so think about Dunbar. He's in the teepee, and they're just like kind of throwing one word a second at him. It's a lot easier to learn. As for the customs, I don't fucking know.
No,
Black magic.
He's just he's a good student.
Yeah, that's it.
He's a good student.
It's his journal.
Well, maybe you should keep the journal with you.
Right,
That'd be a good idea. Just keep your journal with you as you're learning.
Makes references.
Yeah.
It puts
Notes.
the jour in journal. Yeah. Dunbar is charged with desertion, and soldiers shoot Two Socks when the wolf attempts to follow Dunbar. The Sioux track and kill the soldiers, freeing Dunbar. At the winter camp, Dunbar decides to leave with Stands with a Fist because his continuing presence would endanger the tribe. Smiles a Lot returns the diary, which was recovered during Dunbar's liberation. An epilogue states, 13 years later, their homes destroyed, their buffalo gone. The last band of free Sioux submitted to white authority at Fort Robinson, Nebraska. The great horse culture of the plains was gone, and the American frontier was soon to pass into history. So regardless of what happens to Dunbar after he and Stands with a Fist break off from the rest of the tribe, I'm pretty sure this guy has brain damage. Aside from fucking whacking his head at Fort Sedgwick, Dunbar starts the movie falling off his horse. Then, as you mentioned, he whacks his head at Fort Sedgwick. He's out for several hours. This isn't like a little bump. Like he gets knocked out, it's nighttime. He wakes up, it's daytime. Then he gets dropped on his head by the Sioux. Then Union soldiers knock him unconscious with the rifle butts like every hour for a week straight. This guy either heals like Wolverine or he's going to have some serious brain issues.
Didn't he also get almost knocked unconscious when the Pawnee attacked?
Oh, that's
he had
right.
The bloody head. He got knocked there.
The headbutt.
Maybe he's not. Oh, that's it. I feel bad now. Maybe he's just not stupid. Maybe he's challenged. Maybe all of these concussions. He had CTE. Something had happened to him. The wild frontier. Because he's going to be struggling because he doesn't do the natural thing. Oh, prove that this was your post. Go over near the cave 50 feet. You'll find some boiled eggs buried. Who cares about the journal?
This is like the classic thing in every fucking movie where you're like, just talk to the guy's like, no, I'm not talking to you because you're mean.
No, the second that those idiots, those like that private starts beating him up, he should have stood up and said, hey, salute me. Get back in line. He could have controlled the situation. Instead, he's sitting there. You speak English? Yes, me speak English.
It was fucking poor man Seth Green.
Yes.
Well, at this point,
exactly what it was.
Big D, you alluded to this earlier. At this point in the movie, Dances with Wolves needs an emotional gut punch that makes us hate the Union soldiers and root for the Sioux. Because remember, at the beginning of the movie, Union's the good guys, right? So we're pro-Union. But now we have to hate those guys because now we're pro-Sioux. And the solution for that is they have the white men shoot Cisco the horse and Two Socks the wolf. And of course, it works. Like, this manipulation works. But I was left wondering why watching the subsequent massacre of American soldiers didn't get me worked up at all. Because not all of them seem like bad guys. Like the lieutenant, he seemed pretty okay. But I'm like, yeah, fucking kill them all. And I didn't even get emotional when the Pawnee killed Stonecalf. Like, I think that was supposed to be a point in the movie where we get sad, but I was like, meh, I don't care. But a horse and a wolf that ate some jerky, like, they must be avenged.
Gene, I could hear you in my head when they're shooting at Two Socks and he's kind of going back and forth. I could hear you like, come on, boy, run. Leave me alone. Go over the hill.
I was I was dreading this point in the movie, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Like, they didn't do the thing which I thought they were going to do, which, I mean, they did like the little noise of the wolf getting shot. But in movies, when they do like the sound of the dog dying, it's always real bad. And it's tough.
Awful.
Yeah, but like the whole end is really brutal because the ending, what's going to happen to the Native American people, but this ending is not hopeful the way that others like it are. I had already mentioned Last of the Mohicans, and yes, I know last is in the actual title. They are the last of an entire tribe of people, but the end of that still feels like really sweeping and really epic, and they're there and they're sexy and on the edge of a cliff, like ready to live in the wilderness and live out their last days okay. We don't like actually know what happens to them. We don't see that they get cholera or dysentery and die, which they probably did. But here, like, we do. We find out that they all surrender. We find out that their lands are all taken. We know where they're all going to end up, that their cause is lost, and it just left me going like, okay, like, we suck.
Yeah, I had a deep respect for the way this movie ended as well, because we talked about Dunbar becoming Sioux, right? He decides that he is Indian. And with that, he accepts what that is, right? He accepts their fate. And so this is a guy who knows what's coming. He knows that these people are going to be displaced. He knows that their way of life is over. And he knows even by killing that he is going to be on the run just like they are. And he accepts all of that because he could have been, and a lot of movies would have done this, he could have taken stands with a fist and moved to like Kansas or something. And then they lived with their kids and they would think back on those times when they were with the Sioux. But no, this is it for him too. And you talk about that epilogue, it's 13 years. This isn't 100 years later. It's like these same people, these same
lifetime.
People. Yeah.
But I don't understand his ultimate decision of leaving the tribe to protect them. Him not being there isn't going to change what the Union soldiers will do. If the Union soldiers show up, he's not there, they're still going to butcher the tribe.
Oh, no. And that's where Ten Bears is smart. He's like, no, we're getting the fuck out of here too. But I think the idea is that he gives them a trail to sniff so that the rest of them can sort of get away for 13 years with no buffalo and Pawnee attacking them all the time.
Yeah.
Now it's time in the podcast where we give our wipe score for Dancing with Wolves. The wipe score is our way of telling you how many wipes this movie takes to get our respective butts. 0 wipes is a perfect movie. It is free pickled eggs for your wagon trip home. And 5 wipes is an absolute disaster movie. It is when your wife remarries a white dude and your best friend screams his name from a mountaintop. Big D, we'll start with you. What is your wipe score for Dancing with Wolves?
So even though I've been critical of some of the components of the film, I think overall for me it works really well in the quieter moments when they're learning to communicate, when we're learning about the Sioux, the customs. It to me, it was beautiful to watch. It hit me emotionally. And the part that I really love, and I didn't get to talk about it, was Kicking Bird and the relationship with the wife. How he's supposed to know everything. He's the holy man, but he's clueless to what's going on. And the wife says to him, "Hey, they're together. Are you sure? I didn't see that." And he realizes that he has to end her. What are you smiling at?
This is your father of the bride moment.
Yep.
You love this same movie. Oh, he's just a dad.
Shit, you're so right. I do. I do. The moment where he comes out and he has to give permission and he's this big, powerful guy and he just says, "You've been mourning enough. You're not mourning anymore, and walks away. You're right. This is my father of the bride moment.
There's something deep. This is your therapy. There is something deep rooted, Big D, that we need to get at.
Oh, we need to go out into the desert next trip, do some peyote, and this will break through.
This film about the disappearance of the Sioux from the Western frontier,
Shut up.
redemption,
Yes,
boils down to Big D. The part he liked the best was the domestic dynamics between father and adopted daughter.
No, it's relationship
and mom.
Gene, it's about the relationships they built and the sharing of cultures. A bit heavy-handed parts, but I mean, I loved it. It deserves to be top 225. I think it's 0.75.
I really felt for Dunbar in that scene where he's in the lodge with them and he looks over and they're like getting it on the blanket. Because I'm like, I don't know. Like I would be like, I don't know culturally. Is it rude to not watch? Am I supposed to watch?
It's disrespectful if you turn away.
Right, isn't it?
It's your response. I mean, they had no problem standing outside the wedding teepee and cheering them on, hooting and hollering.
Yeah,
so
it's different.
It's your job.
You're not within touching range.
I know. I was about to say they weren't in it though. That wasn't like the marital bed where they were.
Dunbar was in it.
Oh.
All right. Well, that's 3/4 a wipe from Big D. I'm going to come in at half a wipe, just a little bit better. Dance with Wolves is predictable. It is overly simplistic. It is melodramatic. It is a touch too whimsical. It's pretty far-fetched, the whole storyline, but it is so entertaining. And as we started off saying, overwhelmingly beautiful. It made me want to be a better person.
Yeah.
It's cheesy, but it really did. It made me want to like attach a beauty and a patience to the things I do. It made me really look at my newfangled Western way of life and go, man, is this really the way to live? And even if it wasn't an accurate or sophisticated look at the frontier, it left me feeling and thinking about things I don't normally consider. Like we said, it's a gateway movie. And I think it's a movie everyone should see. It holds up just as well in 2023 as it did in 1990, minus the Stands with a Fist flashback. I'm going to go half a wipe.
Yeah, same for me, half. Absolutely gorgeous. I know it's like a cheesy as hell thing to say, but like they don't make shit like this anymore.
True.
It's unique, it's epic, it's still like really incredible in 2023. It's half.
All right, with half a wipe from me and Ash and 3/4 of a wipe from Big D, that gives us an average wipe score of 0.583 repeating wipes for Dance with Wolves.
Wow, Gene, that puts Dances with Wolves right up there. I mean, it's with some good company. These films are all tied at the 26th spot. Boogie Nights, Happy Gilmore, Goodfellas, Full Metal Jacket, Truman Show, and American Beauty.
I think that's fair.
I mean, if at this point, if you're in the top 25 films, it's an impressive feat. And I think this movie is exactly that. It is an epic film that I think stands the test of time.
Well, Josh, I hope you'll forgive my social justice peccadillos and take note that I gave this half a wipe.
Yeah, Josh thought we were going to tear this apart. This is a pretty good one.
We thought I was going to tear it apart.
And also like such an inaccurate prediction of 1.5. Like I feel like really proud because like he's like, if I'm being like level-headed, it's 1.5, right? Like I think this is great. I feel proud. I feel like we're positive.
Also, Josh, thank you for giving us ammunition for all the people who say we only do obscure movies now because we're, quote, running out of 80s and 90s movies. There's so fucking many movies made in those 20 years. We got plenty to go. Speaking of which, what do we have coming up next week?
Gene, next week, after Kermit the Frog decides to pursue a movie career, he starts his cross-country trip from Florida to California. Along the way, he meets and befriends Fozzie Bear, Miss Piggy, Gonzo, and the rock musicians Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem.
Are you doing a voice right now?
I'm not. I'm just laughing because I don't know why. It's late at night. When Kermit is offered a job by Dr. Hooper is it Hooper? It's Hopper.
Doc Hopper.
Sorry, shit. When Kermit
He's not even
offered,
a doctor. He's just a guy named Doc.
When Kermit is offered a job by Doc Hopper to advertise his frog legs at a Chinese... his frog legs at a restaurant... I'm struggling to read. Come on. When Kermit is offered a job by Doc Hopper to advertise the fried chicken legs at his restaurant chain, Kermit turns it down. However, Hopper refuses to relent and pursues Kermit and his company to a final showdown commissioned by Ed C. And I think this might be a little less epic.
But
just
much more racist, Big D.
Dude, it's also got 3 times the budget.
Yep.
This is $65 million.
One of the greatest songs ever in it, too.
What is it? Could you sing a little bit?
Why are there so many Songs about rainbows and what's on the other side. Rainbows are visions. Yeah.
Visions. I don't know the
But
words.
only illusions. No?
I just hope it's not too loud for Big D.
Shut
Get
up.
that music turned way
Too
down.
distracting.
I don't need like an orchestral score for Kermit. as
Don't
he's
tell
trying
me
to-
how to feel, Muppets.
Is there a
Spoiler
point where
alert.
where Piggy's father gives his permission to give her away? I might break down if that happens.
All right. Well, thank you, Ed, for commissioning the upcoming movie. Thank you, Josh, for commissioning Dances with Wolves. Thank you to all the commissioners who make this podcast possible. That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. Email us, host@shatthemovies.com. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or commissioning your own movie. Find all information by visiting our website, shatpod.com. Also, check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. Find all information on our website, shatpod.com/TV, wherever fine podcasts can be found, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Ash and Big D, I'm Gene Lyons. Join us next week for the following movie.
For anyone who has ever dreamed of fame and fortune at the end of the rainbow, this is one of the greatest success stories of all time, proving once and for all that anyone can make it, no matter how young, no matter how green.
The lovers, the dreamers, and me.
All it took was a dream.
Hollywood. You sing, you tell jokes, you can make millions of people happy. Millions of people happy.
The road was long,
Waka, 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 waka.
but never lonely. It was dangerous, but never dull. Filled with unshakable friendship.
Come with us to Hollywood.
When you get rich and famous, maybe we'll show up and exploit your wealth.
Unforgettable faces.
I just gotta catch up with those guys.
And unexpected romance.
Never before.
She was a temperamental beauty,
So freely.
an unmarried woman, and a gorgeous pig.
Miss Piggy. Are you Miss Piggy?
Yes.
Telephone.
Should it be snowing?
No, I don't think so. Moving right along.
Today is your lucky day. The price on the stick is the price you pay. Never more, never less.
We'll take that one.
Yeah. Footloose and fancy free. Getting there is half the fun. Come share it with me.
From tender love
Whisper sweet nothings into my ear.
to sweet regret.
She just walked out on me.
Stay away from women. That's my motto.
But I can't.
Neither can I. That's my trouble.
Hi, I'm Doc Hopper. Inviting you to hop on down and get some Hopper's French fried frog legs.
Don't you want to be rich and famous?
Not working for you, I don't.
From adversity to adventure.
A pig that goes bananas? What is this, a luau?
He never parted with his dream,
Hollywood.
or his friends, or his legs.
I think if you look in your heart, you'll find you really want to let me and my friends go. What I'm saying doesn't make any sense to you? Well then, go ahead and kill me.
All right, boys. Kill him.
The Muppet Movie, starring Charles Durning and Austin Pendleton. Special guest stars Edgar Bergen, Milton Berle, Mel Brooks, James Coburn, Dom DeLuise, Elliot Gould, Bob Hope,
Coffee, peach fudge.
Madeline Kahn,
Buy me a drink?
Carol Kane, Cloris Leachman, Steve Martin,
Yes.
Richard Pryor, Telly Savalas,
You get what?
Paul Williams, and Orson Welles.
I may not be one of your fancy Hollywood frogs, but I deserve a chance.
Life's like a movie, write your own.
At the end of the rainbow, where dreams come true, puppet becomes Muppet, and Earth becomes mirth. And people who aren't people are the funniest people in the world. The Muppet Movie. It's more entertainment than was ever humanly possible.
Hey, I hear this movie is dynamite.